Hey, hi, 8E here with another video. So you should have just read a chapter about Japanese foreign policy, and that's kind of an introduction to some of the ideas that are in this chapter. Now we're going to go and zoom into exactly what all this means. And first of all, I want you guys to listen to the video and to take notes. So whatever I write down, you should be writing down as well. So the first things first is I want you guys to be able to understand and have a technique for looking up and trying to figure out what things mean. So by year 9 level, this should be something that's well in place. So Japan's foreign policy is the title of this chapter. So I want everyone to understand how they're going to figure out what that actually means. So we're going to look up the specific words involved in that phrase, Japan's foreign policy, and try and understand the specific words, then piece it together. So let's define policy. So a policy is a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by an organization or individual. In this case, the organization is Japan. The action in this case is setting a group of rules, and in this case, it's focused particularly on how people and Japan interacts with foreigners. So Japan's foreign policy. I want everyone to write this down while I'm going. So Japan's foreign policy is, so a policy, remember, is an action that is imposed by a group of people, in this case Japan's shogunate. They are in charge at this point, and this action is to do with how Japan interacts with the rest of the world. So Japan's foreign policy is defined as a group of rules imposed by the Japanese shogunate to do with a group of rules imposed by the Japanese shogunate to do with the interaction with foreigners. So that's the definition of what a foreign policy is. So just to go into, while you're still writing that, just have a listen. So since the 1500s, Portuguese, Spanish, English and Dutch traders were allowed to mingle, allowed to come into the Japanese border and to trade goods, to trade weapons, trade ideas. And of course, this meant that there was a lot of ideas flowing between Japan and the rest of the world. So since the 1500s, Portuguese, Spanish, English and Dutch traders were trading with Japan. So the Tokugawa, remember Tokugawa is a period of time in Japan, and a lot of things happened in the Tokugawa period, and a lot of Japanese culture came from that period. So the Tokugawa shogunate didn't like this. So they started to restrict Japan's relationship with the rest of the world. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting what we read just then in the book, and we're condensing it into some main ideas that you need to understand. So the Tokugawa shogunate started to restrict Japan's relationship with the rest of the world. Reasons being, what's going on there? Okay, the reasons for this was that Tokugawa shoguns feared the influence of the West on Japanese culture. So by the West, when I refer to the West, I'm meaning Europe. I'm meaning most of Europe, all the countries that were kind of in power at that point, the colonial countries. So that was before Australia was colonised. So this is before this country even kind of existed in the traditional sense. So the West was pretty much Europe. They feared the influence it had on Japanese culture, but this the restriction on trading wasn't well received. Well received by the daimyo. Who wanted to trade with foreigners. So the daimyo, because they were in charge of the runnings, but the basic runnings of the country, they wanted all the resources. They wanted all the stuff so that it could help them to be in charge of the armies, because they were the ones that supplied the swords to the samurai. They were the ones that provided all the equipment for the peasants for them to work. They provided the infrastructure, I guess, for the country to work in the social system that was set up. So there are a few reasons. The main reason why the Tokugawa shoguns feared the influence of the West on Japanese culture, and they wanted to preserve that, and that was the main reason they set up this policy. So the effects, though. The effects. So when I write this down, I want you guys to set it up in a similar way. If I highlight something, they're the main points that you need to learn. So this brought about many changes to Japanese society. First of all, we have the effect it had on Christian missionaries. So remember, Christianity was the main religion in Europe at the time. We learnt about that before in the weeks previous. And what happened was that a lot of the Portuguese and Spanish traders brought Christian missionaries with them. So Christian missionaries were people that tried to convert other countries into their religion. So Spanish and Portuguese traders brought Christian missionaries with. So the effect of this was that by 1570, there were over 30,000 Japanese people converted. So 30,000 Japanese people were converted to the Christian religion. So the key point for this one is the shogunate did not like this. They didn't like this. They didn't like the fact that Japanese people were loyal to a power that was outside of the country. So the shogunate wanted absolute power, and they wanted their people to be completely and 100% loyal to them. So the fact that Japanese people were loyal to a foreign power, i.e. the Pope, meant that they didn't actually have complete power. They didn't like this. They felt uncomfortable about that. So they started imposing these restrictions. Also, the church congregations allowed interactions between social classes. So the different social classes in Japanese culture, these congregations allowed this kind of interactions to happen. So this was actually frowned upon in Japanese society. This is actually frowned upon in Japanese society. Therefore, the effect was Christianity was outlawed in 1637. So I hope you're going all right with the note taking. I know there's quite a few notes, but this is better than just than doing a test at the end of the lesson. So hopefully you do get something out of this. Another effect was the effect on foreign trade. So foreign trade, not only, so there were permits being issued at this point. So only a select few people outside of the country could enter. And by a select few, I mean a select few. There was only about 25 people, individual people that were allowed to come in with goods. So the main point in this is that permits issued allowing only a select few traders from outside Japan to enter. Okay, so between 1603 to 1635, the permit system was put into action. So these were the times in which they were starting to influence, starting to enact this permit system. Only 12 European and 11 Chinese traders were given these permits. So 12 European and 11 Chinese traders were given. So it was very, very restricted. When before there would have been hundreds of traders coming to and fro, only about 23 people were given these permits. The main exports, just for interest purposes, for the Japanese were, so the main exports, the things that they sold to other people were silver, copper, diamonds, and swords. The main imports were Chinese silk. Southeast Asia provided them with a lot of sugar and deer skins as well. So the shogun actually vowed to pursue anyone who broke this permit law, anyone who tried to trade with Japan. So any pirate is the actual name for people who try and trade and whatnot and pillage and plunder illegally. Pirate or nation who attempted to trade. Okay, so they only issued permits. They had a permit system. If you didn't have a permit, you weren't allowed to trade. The last effect this had on Japan was a policy of isolation. So this is the last point we'll be writing down. Not only were foreigners not allowed to enter, Japanese people were not allowed to leave. They were not allowed to leave the country, so it was isolated. They